Welcome to all who have just come. Jimmy is with you. And today, as always, we have your favorite stories. Do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel. This motivates me very much to please you with new content. I will not detain you. Let's start. First story today from the user, Unlikely Ad Let's Listen Him. I, 17 male, have a strained relationship with my mum, 35F, after an incident that happened about 6 years ago. My mum was super strict and a helicopter parent, so we fought a lot over my grades and the trouble I got into at school. She had essentially abandoned me, signing over custody to my dad after I had told her something along the lines of, "I hate you, and I wish I lived with dad." Typical things an angsty preteen says to their parent. But that fight seemed to have broke her, and she cried before dropping me off at my dad's apartment. I thought it wouldn't be a big deal, and I would just see her the next day after she proved her point. But she left me there. After that, things got essentially worse for me. My grades dropped, and I kept getting into trouble at school, almost to the point where I was kicked out. My dad never had job security, so money was tight. His GF also wasn't fond of me, saying I was dumped on them. I wanted to go back to live with my mum. I thought to apologize. But my mum had essentially moved on with her life. She went back to college to get her degree and was always studying, and later on was focused on her new work. On the weekends, I would get to see her. Things were tense between us. She tried so hard to be the fun parent, eating takeout and leaving me to do what I wanted. But it was so unlike her, and we became more estranged. 3 years ago, she started dating Paul, 39 male, a widower with 2 daughters, 9 female, and 13 female. She started treating his daughters like they were her own, and they started calling her Mummy, which irritated me. Eventually, they moved into my mum's house and changed my childhood bedroom into one of the daughters' room. I was livid when I found out, saying some mean things about the girls and refused to go back there for my mum's weekends. But she was confused on why I was acting this way. Because of this fight, she thought I wouldn't be attending the engagement party when she announced her and Paul would be getting married. Besides, she didn't want there to ruin the perfect picture of her new family. So I made it a point to go for the party and called her out on her behavior. I wanted to confront her and tell her she wouldn't have to bother with me after I go off to college. But I may have taken it a tad too far. Everyone kept talking about how Paul's daughters were like her children and how it would be when she had more kids. And it snapped something in me. I called her a horrible parent and told her she was trying to replace me with the little brats after she had abandoned me, along with some other insults I don't really remember. Paul kicked me and my dad out, saying I was an asshole for making his fiancée and girls cry and ruining the engagement party. He said I won't be allowed to the wedding unless I called and apologized. I may have taken it a bit too far, but my dad agrees she had it coming after abandoned a young child at an age when I needed my mother. So, AITA, and should I apologize? Author update this story. So a lot has happened. I never expected this post to get this much attention with so many mixed reactions, and honestly, it confused me to say the least. While this forum was blowing up, I had to go to school like normal. It's been a few weeks since the engagement party, and a kid who there had been relentless mocking me for what happened. I thought he would eventually let it go. But yesterday, when he brought it again, I lost was cool and got into a physical fight with him. He was given detention, but I was suspended. The school called my mum and got Paul instead. Since she was in a meeting, he came and got me. Things were awkward in the car ride, and we didn't say a word to each other until he asked me if I was going to apologize to my mum. I told him I didn't even want to go to his unwise wedding. Paul was confused when I said this, and told me that my mum had gotten mad at him for saying I couldn't attend, and that she knew I wouldn't apologize if they told me to, because I was stubborn. He said she had called my dad weeks ago and said I could go because she really wanted me to be there, and my dad said he would talk to me. I don't know why, but when I heard this, I burst out in tears, embarrassingly enough. I don't know if it was the suspension or reading all the comments, but I really couldn't hold it in anymore. It took me way too long to stop, and Paul was really freaked out, so he parked somewhere and tried to calm me down. I ended up telling him everything about when happened when I was a kid and how I felt about my mum. I also confessed that I wished she would yell at me or scold me for my outburst because it felt like she didn't care anymore. and just hated me for what I said. It's up, I know. I thought if I ever repeated what I wrote on this post to another person, they would think I was human garbage. But he just listened to me and let me get everything off my chest. I guess that's what being a girl dad is, huh? Surprisingly, he didn't blame me. In fact, it was the opposite. He said he understood me. He works with her, so he knew that my mom was a tough woman. And he had never seen her cry before until that day, and was unsure about how to approach her after, so he didn't blame me for not knowing how to talk to her after what happened when I was a child. He didn't give me details, but he assured me that my mom didn't hate me, and the situation is more complicated than what I know. Paul said I shouldn't bear all the blame, and if I was comfortable, maybe myself and my mom could go speak to the therapist he saw after his wife had passed. He was mad at my dad though. Apparently, this was not the first time my dad had said he would talk to me about something, and just didn't. Paul suspected my dad wanted to get me to have another outburst at the wedding because he was still somewhat resentful towards my mother. I don't know how to take this because, while my dad didn't really like my mom, I don't think he would actually do something like that. Either way, I think I owe to myself and my mom to at least try and reconciliate and deal with my trauma, so I could let go of my anger towards her. I at least apologized to Paul's girls. My dad wasn't home, so I spent the rest of the day at my mom's. The 9-yo forgave me almost instantly, like she didn't actually cared and asked me about dinosaurs for the rest of the evening. The 13-yo is still pretty mad, but mostly because Paul had her give up her new room and share with her sister. I tried to say I was okay if she took back the room. I wasn't, but it only seemed right to give it to her after what I did. But Paul said they'll make a plan when they remodeled. I knew I needed to apologize to my mom as well, but that seemed just so much harder. I know you guys recommended writing a letter, but I didn't really have enough time, nor did I know what I was gonna say yet. There is these flower bushes in our garden though, and I have a vivid memory of when I was a kid. My mom getting mad when I destroyed one only to forgive when I had given her the flowers from them. It's a bit pathetic for her grown child to give her weeds because he couldn't get a word out, but I think the gesture meant the same for her, like it did for me. She finally asked me if I was better living at my dad's, and honestly, I don't know. I know you guys don't think the best of him, and things did seem to be worse when I stayed with him, but he was a decent dad, and I didn't want to just lose him like I did my mom. She said she would speaking to him after our meeting with the school on Monday for the family therapy. And if I was open to the idea of staying with her some nights during the week too. As of now, Paul had spoken to her and she already made the appointment for us to see the therapist next week. She also spoke to me about anger management classes too, and said she would go with me if that what I wanted. I honestly don't know if what's going to happen with school. If the therapy would work for us, and if I would ever be able to truly let go of my built-up resentment. But I feel like everything's gonna be okay. Thanks for all the comments, even the horrible ones. Got me thinking just a bit. I will never be posting on Reddit again, but I do appreciate having the space to find the words to say what I needed to. And everyone who shared their deep and some dark stories that made them relate to my relationship. I hope things turn out okay for you too. What I think about this story, you never lost your mother. She was still there, so stop saying you lost her. She continued to be part of your life. She never actually abandoned you. You never vocalized how you felt. So she thought you were better with your father. Why is it always the woman who has to put the mental work into finding out what men or boys are thinking? If anyone abandoned you, it was your father for the first years of your life. Very little visits and no child support, yet your mother kept her visits with you and paid. And your father continues to try to get in the way of your relationship with your mother. He continues to whisper in your ear and continues to not inform you of anything your mother or Paul has said. He is setting you up to hate your mother even more. You have been given proof, yet you still hold him on a pedestal. He's a good dad. No, he's not. He's weaponizing you against your mother. He's been weaponizing you against your mother, and he knows his manipulation is working. Let's check the user comment. I thought you were the AH, but didn't vote as I was also convinced you didn't know the whole story behind what happened. I'm really glad you got a chance to let it all out, and with Paul, who's just a close bystander after all. And a sweet one, it seems. I hope everything will improve for you now that you can talk about it. Really, this is just a very good outcome. Don't let it slip and work on your anger and disappointment. It will be all right. And bravo for your ability to second-guess yourself. The second story from the user No Payment, let's listen. I, 26 male, have been married to my wife Emma for 4 years. She was a social work major who I met in one of my gen ed classes. I explained to her I was a mechanical engineering major. She then asked if I could tutor her in math, and that's how we began dating. Afterwards, I decided to get my master's in Japanese to help me gain more career opportunities. My wife thought it was a silly idea and said she wouldn't be funding it. So then we decided to keep our finances separate. It wasn't a big deal, since I was still working anyways. I just had less free time, so she was making more than me during this time. It paid off, and I recently landed a high-paying job, and with that came more stress due to me having to travel to Japan often. I've really been wanting to get into gaming, so I invested in computer parts, costing around $1,500. Once I took the parts out of the box, my wife noticed the receipt and asked how I could be so irresponsible with my money. She assumed I still made the same amount, but when I told her that I make triple that amount, she began giving me the silent treatment. During this time, I began to notice my things were going missing. I wanted to go fishing with some friends one time, and when I was looking for my rods, then she must have noticed and said she had given them to her uncle. I told her not to take my stuff without asking, but didn't mind too much because they were old. So I just bought some more. Another time, I was about to go to the gym and I was looking for my pre-workout. I always keep 3 jars. I luckily had a can of Monster, and that helped. I asked my wife when she got home from work, and she said she gave them to her cousin. I asked her to reimburse me because they cost $50 a jar. She said I make enough to replace them and just ignored me for the rest of the day. One day, when she thought I was asleep, she was talking to someone on the phone explaining how she's going to move my parents into our house. She hadn't explained this me. We only have 3 rooms. One is her office, one is my office or game room, and the other is our bedroom. She told the person on the phone, who I assume is her sister, that she's going to give my gaming setup to her brother to make room and that I'll get over it eventually. So today, I left work early to catch her in the middle of her plans. And when I walked in our apartment, her and her brother were then placing everything into a box. I asked what was going on, and my wife, whose face was pale, said she was cleaning when her brother came by. I asked him, did he plan on taking my computer? Of course he denied. So I went in the room to get the iPad we share, and I looked through the texts on there, and it clearly shows my wife telling him when to pick it up and to deny that he had it. I told him to get out and asked her why does she think she's so entitled to my stuff. I have never yelled at her, and I guess this scared her because she began to cry. She ended up packing a bag and went to stay with her sister. While she was out, I picked up a lock for my office. Her sister texted me calling my asshole. I'm beginning to think I could have handled this better. I'm looking for advice. Author update this story. After about a week staying at her sister's house, Emma called me and asked if we could meet up. I agreed, and we met at a park. She apologized for everything and said she thought she was doing what was best for everybody. I asked what if I just gave her expensive makeup to my sister. She admitted that she would be upset. I then asked, why did she think it would be any different for me? She didn't have a reason, and her sister told her how unfair she was being to me. We decided to give it another chance, and she moved back in. It was going good until she started moving her things into my office. I asked her what she was doing, and she explained how she needed the room for her parents. I told her no, and that's not happening. I grabbed her things and placed them back into her office. I told her that they could move in, but my space has to remain untouched. On top of that, we need to determine how bills are going to be paid, because she called me a selfish jerk and then ran back to her sister's. I guess her sister told her she was being inconsiderate once again, and apparently they got into an argument because the sister refuses to take their parents in and said she's tired of hearing about her problems. I agree with her. Her sister has 4 kids. Her sister called and told me everything and said that Emma went to her parents' house. I tried to call her, but she ignored my phone calls for 2 weeks. I decided I couldn't live like this, so I filed for divorce and handed to her at her parents' house. She called and begged me to forgive her. I told her I'm not sure if I can. She refused to sign it until we go to counseling. I refused and said she had 2 weeks to suggest that. So now I live alone. She still refuses to sign the papers, but that doesn't stop the divorce, it just makes it harder. What I think about this story, your wife has not learned anything, has not changed as she promised, and still feels entitled to your money and your things. She's disrespectful, uncommunicative, and frankly quite mean. Stand your ground. You're doing the right thing. Let's check the user comment. She had a problem supporting OP while he was taking steps to advance his career, which fortunately he didn't need. However, has no problem with stealing from him once his hard work paid off. Good for OP for getting away from her. Thanks to everyone who watched to the end. It was nice to see you. See you in the next part. Bye-bye.